What is the point of a public broadcaster? Some argue that they shouldn't exist, that the government has no business owning a broadcaster. They say that private broadcast companies can provide all the media we need, and that a public broadcaster crowds out and stifles these businesses. It is true that in the modern world, private broadcasters often have much higher viewing figures than public broadcasters. So why have a public broadcaster? Firstly, we need to distinguish between a public broadcaster and what may be called a national broadcaster or a government broadcaster. The latter are owned and controlled by the government and are generally used to pump out pro-government messages to the population. They are tools of propaganda. A public broadcaster, on the other hand, is funded by government money, but is required to operate independently under its charter to serve the community, not under direction of the government of the day. Often, a public broadcaster can be the most vocal in critiquing a government's actions, or indeed any political or public party. The major thing that sets a public broadcaster apart from a commercial one is that its funding comes from the government, not revenue. This means that it is not compelled to try to generate money, unlike a commercial concern. A private broadcaster must generate money or it will eventually collapse and go out of business. They generally do this via advertising. A public broadcaster can happily ignore the concerns of the advertising industry and serve only its audience. If the advertising companies didn't like a program or even the reporting of a news story, the commercial broadcasters can be coerced into not showing it or risk losing their revenue and failing. This cannot happen to a public broadcaster because their funding is not controlled by any company. Public broadcasters are free to run material that businesses don't want their customers to see, without having to worry about whether it will cost them money. Nobody can try to buy influence over a public broadcaster, like they could over a commercial one. This funding source also means that a public broadcaster can successfully make programs that don't have mass appeal. Programs aimed at minority audiences, such as rural, isolated, or culturally diverse communities. The commercial broadcaster's compulsion to make money based on viewership will always drive them towards the bigger audiences, which is fine for those in the majority. But without a public broadcaster, smaller groups are likely to be totally ignored. If you enjoy programs on commercial networks and find there are programs on a public network that don't interest you at all, that probably means the public broadcaster is doing its job. A public broadcaster should make programs for those who aren't served by the profit-driven network's quest for the biggest audience they can get. Part of a public broadcaster's role is to bring diversity to a media landscape by being able to make content that does not appeal to a commercial company. The stability of having a set budget also allows a public broadcaster more flexibility to pursue a long game. An exercise like investigative journalism can take a long time and a lot of resources with no payoff in the meantime, or at all. Some investigations get nowhere. The risk and expense makes them unattractive to commercial interests, but the benefit for the community can be huge. Any broadcaster can do these things, but increasingly, a public one is more able and more likely to. The point of a public broadcaster is that it is the only type of broadcaster that can put its audience's interests first, ahead of its revenue source. Even those that operate on direct subscription are compelled to chase the money at all times. A public broadcaster can make programs that aren't widely popular, but that benefit the community. Private broadcasters can indeed handle a lot of the entertainment and informing of the public, but there are some things they will never be able to do. For the media landscape to be truly diverse, robust, and inclusive, we need the public broadcasters. Comment to join the conversation or subscribe for more videos.